Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Darren and I'm a third year medical student studying at Monash University here in Melbourne, Australia. You guys recently sat the GAT, and a shout out to Mel and Emily for kindly donating their copies of the GAT to me. I sent out a poll on my Instagram asking you guys whether there were any questions you wanted me to go through, and I've collected a couple along with the writing tasks as well, which I may help with privately or I might make a video on them. But overwhelmingly, there was one question and one section of part B that a lot of people wanted me to go through, and that is what I'll be talking about today. Enjoy. Okay, let's have a look at the question. With questions like this, it is easy to get confused. So I don't read it all at once and then try to understand it. Instead, I try to understand it as I go along. So a person is building a wall, essentially, and they're building either simple walls or triangular walls, so kind of two types, using large blocks. Okay, so there are walls, and each wall is composed of smaller blocks. And the block dimension is 0.5 by 0.25 by 0.25. So the block dimension, not the wall dimension. And at first, I thought the blocks looked something like this, and I like to draw them out just to visualize them. But having a look at the diagrams in the graph, in the table, and also considering the dimensions, the blocks look a bit more like this. Once I've read up to there, I had a look at the third body paragraph, but it kind of seems like it's just explaining the formulas in the diagram, so I didn't read it. I just went straight to the graphs and the tables and tried to understand those. So you can kind of see that it's in 3D, you're given a front view and the side view, so I really tried to understand it and draw them out. So this is what the simple wall looks like. So from the front, it is a rectangle, from the side it is a rectangle, so overall it just looks like a rectangular prism, essentially. And the triangular wall was a little harder, but if you think about standing in front of it, it looks like a rectangle, but it's standing at the side that really helps you out, and it looks like a triangle. And what looks like a triangle from the side and kind of looks like a rectangle from the front, well, a triangular prism does. And the last statement here is kind of just insurance against people who might take the question the wrong way, and it's just saying that the wall is arranged like this rather than this. Let's dive into the questions then. Feel free to pause at any time. I will be putting blocks of working out on the screen and talking about it, so if you'd like to figure it out yourself, why I worked it out the way I did, then feel free to pause it. Question 45. Suppose that the triangular wall is H concrete blocks high and L meters long. And how many concrete blocks are required to increase the height of this wall by 2 concrete blocks? Another note with questions like this is that there are kind of 2 strategies. One is you use algebra, so you use the letters you're given H and L. The second strategy is that you just give H and L values. So you say H is 8, L is 3, make them kind of random so you won't get answers by coincidence, and you can just try out the solutions A, B, C, D and see which one is correct. I would advise algebra because that would actually get you to the correct answer, whereas sometimes if you just sub in values, you might coincidentally reach one of the other answers. But it is a last ditch attempt if you're finding the algebra very difficult. So there are a lot of specifics here and a lot of letters, and it's a little confusing, but overall the gist of the question is that we have more blocks in a higher wall and we have less blocks in a lower wall, and we're just trying to find the difference between them. And the height difference is 2. So overall, the equation would be number of blocks in the higher wall minus the number of blocks in the lower wall. So how do we actually find the number of blocks in a wall? So let's start with the smaller wall, which we are given H concrete blocks high and L meters long. So it took me a while to figure out the formula because looking at the question itself, I thought that H multiplied by H plus 1 was the number of blocks total. But I kind of figured it out by looking at the examples in a bit more detail, which is really important. You want to make sure you're understanding every piece of information the question is giving. So especially for the simple wall, which is a bit easier, if you look at the graph or the picture representation, in the front view there are 16 blocks, and in the side view it's 2 layers thick. So overall, we should have 32 concrete blocks in total, but the equation for H only gives me 16. So what does that kind of tell me? Well, it tells me that the 16 isn't the total amount of blocks, and I need to multiply it by something, and that something happens to be the number of meters, which in this question is going to be L. So that means that the total number of blocks in the triangular wall would then be H multiplied by H plus 1 multiplied by L. And what would the total be for the higher wall, the wall that's higher by 2 concrete blocks? Well, you just replace H by H plus 2, and you would get this equation. Now you have both equations, it's just the total for the higher wall minus the total for the lower wall. Do some manipulation and you should arrive at the correct answer, which is C. Now looking at question 46, we have a simple wall that is 4 concrete blocks high and L meters long. And we're asked if all those concrete blocks that were in that simple wall were instead converted into a triangular wall, which was 4 concrete blocks high, how long would it be? So the gist of it is that we need to know how many total blocks were used to make that simple wall. And then we sort of reverse engineer that and find out what the length of the triangular wall would be. Because we kind of know the height of the triangular wall, we will know the total number of blocks needed, and we just need to figure out the length. With the total number of blocks, like I said earlier, it's 4 times the height times L. And here the height is 4, so the total number of blocks used would be 16L. And then we just put that into the equation for a triangular wall. So 16L is the total, and that equals H, which is 4, multiplied by H plus 1, so 4 plus 1, multiplied by L, except here it's a different L, because the simple wall and the triangular wall are not the same length. So here I just wrote L1 to represent the different length. And so we're trying to find L1, which is the length of the triangular wall. So 16L equals 20L1, L1 equals 4 over 5L, and the answer is B. Finally, question 47, and as we read it, we see how many cubic meters. So that kind of rings a bell for the 0.5 by 0.25 by 0.25 dimensions. And finally, we're making use of it because we haven't really used it up until this point. So it's a simple wall, which is 1 meter long and is H concrete blocks high. And to figure out how many cubic meters of concrete there are total, we need to know how many concrete blocks there are. And because we know the dimensions of each, it's just a matter of multiplying the volume of one block by how many blocks there are. So how many blocks are there in total? It's just 4 multiplied by H multiplied by L, that same old formula we've been using. Here L is 1 because it's 1 meter long, and so the total number of blocks is 4H. And now we need to find the overall volume, which would be 4H multiplied by the dimensions of one block of concrete, so 0.5 multiplied by 0.25 multiplied by 0.25 multiplied by 4H. If you look at the answers, they're all in fractions, and so it would make sense to convert all the decimals to fractions, and they work out nicely, just like it often does in the GAT. There's often a nicer way of doing it than multiplying decimals altogether. And so 4H multiplied by a half, by a quarter, will give you H over 8, which is option B. Thank you guys for tuning in to today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it helpful. Enjoy the last little bit of term 2. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.